I am Brandon Vincent.
And I'm Lauren King. We're defining racism. In this documentary, our goal was to analyze responses to the various questions revolving around racism. We were able to gather perspectives from a variety of people, which allowed us to further understand society's meanings and understandings of racism. So stick around, and who knows, you might see some familiar faces. So, what is racism?
Um, what is racism? Oh, geez. It's a very broad question. Racism is
when one group feels superior to another group because of the color of their skin.
one group is superior because of their race, ethnicity, color of skin.
Racism is when you discriminate or you are prejudiced towards another person based on the color of their skin, their culture, or where they're from.
Fickle, and it's tricky, and it's also subliminal, and I think it's also it evolves over time. It is something that we used to abhor and we still abhor. It used to be super obvious and apparent, and nowadays that's not existent anymore, especially post-civil rights movement, when our government literally said that you can't expressly deny services to someone based off of the color of their skin. And yet nowadays what that has resulted in is racism evolving to be something a little bit more sneaky.
The dehumanization of people solely because of the color of their skin. But I don't think it's just the color of their skin. It has to do with more, where people's ethnic background is. Because
a centuries-long construct in which historically Europeans have taught many other peoples of the world that they are superior in terms of physical characteristics as well as mental characteristics, and they have used that to take over the world, and it's a psychological warfare.
From these responses, we see that society has formulated a generic approach to the question, which explains the lack of original responses amongst our interviewees. Can racism be eliminated? If so, how?
I don't think of racism can necessarily be eliminated because there has been such a long history, at least in the United States, there's been such a long history of slavery and discrimination against minorities that I don't think it can necessarily be eliminated, but it can definitely, we can bring awareness to it and hopefully make change, and maybe far off in the future, I mean, that would be great.
I think it's hard to eliminate it because so many people, you can't just have one person going around and being like, oh, you're not gonna be racist anymore. It's hard to control because there are so many millions and billions of people on the planet that I don't think it's really possible to eliminate it. It's possible to digress it and reduce it, but it's not possible to eliminate it.
I think racism won't be eliminated anytime soon. It dates as far back as to slavery, so it has a strong hold on our society, and I don't think it's something that's going to be eliminated anytime soon.
Can racism be eliminated? Ideally. Ideally. However, it's such a machine that's ingrained into our culture, into our society. The fact that our society was, created on white supremacy makes it so much more difficult to unravel it.
I think it can maybe person to person, but I think on a larger scale, it'd be kind of tough.
I think on the micro level, racism will never be eliminated. I think that people will always want some reason to look at someone as being different or have some reason to hate someone. But on the macro level of our government, our structures in our country, I think that we can do a lot to change and progress how we view races, even if it's just putting people of different races in positions of power in our government.
From this, it is clear that there is hope that racism can be eliminated. However, there is more concern on when and how this will happen. How has your social background shaped your view of racism?
It's a good question. So, okay, well, I'm from Connecticut, so I'm from a pretty small town, about 9,000 people, predominantly white. And I think with Connecticut and with a lot of states in the Northeast, people assume that they're very progressive places, which for the most part they are. But what people don't realize is there are pockets in a lot of these states, especially Connecticut, where ignorance is kind of contained. I'll put it lightly and say that. And it's interesting to think about because I'm from Portland, and we're literally in a valley, which I think is kind of like a metaphor, because like a lot of people think it's there's a lot of diversity, a lot of like intermingling, but it is a valley, and I feel like before heading to New Orleans, it's not that I wasn't progressive, but there were misconceptions I had about my role to play in race, and also with race relations, solely because I just wasn't exposed to a lot of diversity. And definitely coming down here, that's something I wanted to be exposed to. So
It made me understand that sometimes it's not even so much about the color of the skin, but the social construct of knowing that you're black. Because I may not be as dark skinned as my brother or my dad, but as long as somebody can tell that I'm black, they'll treat me the same terrible way. So
My parents, especially my mom, did a lot of research into the history of slavery, racism, Black Power movement, and things like that. And so I've always been raised in a conscious house. And of course, I'm also born and raised in Atlanta, which is a city with a huge population of Black people who are educated and achieving. So I've always been raised around people who have shown me great role models of what being black is like. And but I'm also from Georgia, which is in the South, and my family is from Alabama and Georgia, and we've seen all kinds of degrading stereotypes and models of what being black is, but my parents have definitely channeled that positivity for me. So I have always grown up with that positive kind of sense of being black.
I've always been aware that I was a black female. Growing up, I had very strong black female role models who taught me that I was going to have to work a little bit harder than someone who wasn't a person of color, just because that's how society worked. With people of color, we always have to, work twice as hard to get to the same places. So I've always been aware of that, and I continue to think about that here at school and in my daily life.
From this, we see that racism persists as it is dependent upon the environment in which it is present. So, have you ever experienced racism?
Yeah, so I actually did experience one thing. I mean, I went to a 100% black school, did theater in Nashville, so I experienced some microaggressions growing up. It wasn't until about a week before graduation that I experienced like blatant or like just very bold racism. I was actually chased by someone in the car behind me, chased me with a Confederate flag on the front of their car. And they said that they were trying to teach me a lesson when basically I reached the gas station. I told my friend, roll down the window. I screamed for help. And the lady basically said she was just trying to teach me a lesson. But at that moment, I realized that I wasn't a black man who worked so hard to destigmatize the view of black men. I was just another, black boy who needs to learn a lesson.
Not necessarily, not directly for me, but I know that I've experienced countless microaggressions. I know when my sister and I talk about where we go to college, people have asked us, oh, is it because are you there for affirmative action, reasons of affirmative action, or things like that, to throw in that, oh, well, maybe it's because you're black, that's why you're in a certain position, or whatnot. So definitely microaggressions. I would not say I've been called like the N-word or anything like that. I've heard white people say the N-word, and it hasn't been, you know, in a specifically derogatory sense. It's just because it's cute now. But, you know, not like strict racism, if that's a term.
Yes. Most of the neighborhoods and schools I've gone to have been majority white. My high school was. I don't know, I remember as a kid, people following me and my brother around in stores, and sometimes people like locking their car doors or their house doors and like they see us, so stuff like that.
Racism is a shocking topic, and many of our interviewees have encountered it. However, it is ironic that the topic itself is still overlooked. Race is often unacknowledged in society. What can we do to change this?
I think there needs to be more room created in our society or in our interactions amongst people of different backgrounds to share their stories and to let their stories be heard.
I think that the best thing for me is just like growing up in a household where you're taught and educated about race and about how we should love all people no matter what their differences is. So that's something I think of a lot, is just like how I'm going to raise my children, or just the little things that I can do every day to like change what people view of races and just everything.
We definitely need people who are educated on racism and the struggles of not just black people but minorities in general who are victims of racism, but we also need allies who are educated and who are willing to give up some of their privilege to speak out and help other people come out of places of degradation.
Well, I just saw the movie The Hate You Give, so my simplest answer would be just to teach people to love and to not hate. Racism is something that is taught, and anything that can be learned can be unlearned. So I think really teaching children at a young age to just love people regardless of their differences will definitely help that.
So overall, when we're tackling this social problem, racism, I think it's important that we come together as a community and we understand each other, we use each other's resources, we use each other's experiences to kind of develop an overall solution to this problem. Of course, it's not going to be easy, and I think that just listening to others and kind of taking our own initiative and doing smaller things will help us kind of find a solution to this large problem.
Racism is very institutionalized, so I believe if we find a way for us to make sure that all of our public policy areas are diverse and represent the actual community, that we'll have a way for us to actually enact change. So from this, we can say that racism can't necessarily be defined, but we can definitely see everyone's different perspectives.
And clearly there's so much more work to do on this topic. So we hope you learned something new. We hope you can take something away from this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, comment below. Just kidding. Yeah, thanks. Bye.